This video is devoted to the Italian light cruiser Emanuele Filiberto Duca d'Aosta, often referred to by the abbreviated name Duca d'Aosta. The ship belongs to the eponymous Duca d'Aosta type, which is the fourth production series, subclass, within the Condottieri class of cruisers. In total, this class included 5 subclasses within which 12 units were built. The class name translates from Italian as military leaders, and all ships of the series bore the names of historical commanders. In particular, Duca d'Aosta is named in honor of a representative of the Savoy dynasty, Emanuele Filiberto, who held the title of Duke of Aosta. The name itself points to the Aosta region, which possesses an ancient history. Ships of the Condottieri class were laid down between 1928 and 1937. Within the class, a substantial evolution of tactical and technical characteristics can be traced. During the improvement of the designs, the full displacement grew from 7,000 to nearly 12,000 tons, and the hull length increased by approximately 66 feet, from 558 to 623 feet. The cruiser in question is equipped with 8 guns of 152 mm caliber. For comparison, the following 5th series, the Duca degli Abruzzi type, possessed reinforced armament of 10 guns. The creation of these ships was dictated by the necessity of updating the Italian fleet for operations in the waters of the Mediterranean Sea. The specifics of the theater of military operations influenced design features. Unlike ocean-going vessels, cruising range and the level of habitability, comfort for the crew, were not priority parameters. Despite this, the autonomy indicators were acceptable. The cruising range was 4,000 nautical miles at a speed of 18 knots, which is a sufficiently high value for cruising speed. Technically, the Duca d'Aosta type represented a further development of the previous Raimondo Montecuccoli subclass. The subsequent 5th subclass became the ships to which the cruiser Giuseppe Garibaldi belongs. Italian ships of this type bore the names of historical figures. Structurally, they bear significant resemblance to the Soviet cruisers of the Kirov type, including the ships Kirov and Molotov. When designing the Soviet vessels, the Italian cruisers of the Raimondo Montecuccoli and Duca d'Aosta types, specifically the ship Eugenio di Savoia, were taken as a basis. Many components were copied, however, the armament scheme underwent changes. Instead of 4 twin-gun turrets, the Soviet counterparts were fitted with 3 triple-gun turrets with guns of 180 mm caliber. Despite differences in armament, the general architecture of the projects had much in common. Within the framework of the Condottieri series, a growth in tactical and technical characteristics, including displacement and armor thickness, was observed from subclass to subclass. Nevertheless, the protection of the ships was not their main feature. The maximum thickness of the armor belt was about 70 millimeters. Such armor was calculated to counter 152 millimeter shells at medium distances, typical for combat operations in the waters of the Mediterranean Sea. The primary purpose of these ships was the protection of convoys from enemy light cruisers, primarily of the British and French fleets, armed with similar artillery. The main caliber of the ship was represented by 152 mm guns with a length of 53 calibers. The firing range was about 15.5 miles, and the elevation angle was 45 degrees. The rate of fire varied depending on the manufacturer of the gun systems. On the cruiser Duca d'Aosta, guns were installed with a firing rate of up to 8 shots per minute, which was a sufficiently high indicator. The auxiliary battery consisted of 100 mm Minizini mounts. By the beginning of the war, these systems were already considered obsolete. Modern anti-aircraft artillery was represented by 37 mm guns and 20 mm automatic cannons. However, the effectiveness of the anti-aircraft fire control devices remained low. Torpedo armament included 6 21-inch tubes, 3 per side. Initially, the carriage of spare torpedoes was envisaged, but this practice was abandoned during service. The ship could be used for laying minefields, taking on board up to 150 mines in an overload condition. Aviation armament consisted of the IMAM Ro-43 floatplane biplane, which was standard for that period. Armor protection was relatively light. The belt thickness was about 2.8 inches, the traverses about 2 inches, and the conning tower up to 3.9 inches. Such protection could not ensure survival against hits from heavy armor-piercing shells, for example, from battleships. During World War II, the cruiser operated in the Mediterranean Sea as part of the 2nd Squadron. The only major battle in which it participated was the Battle of Punta Stilo, in Allied terminology, the Battle of Calabria. Significant forces participated in the clash. On the British side, the battleships Warspite, Malaya, Royal Sovereign, and an aircraft carrier. On the Italian side, the battleships Giulio Cesare, Conte di Cavour, as well as heavy cruisers and destroyers, more than 20 pennants on each side in total. The battle ended in an exchange of fire and mutual damage to a number of ships. The only total loss during the operation was an Italian destroyer that sank during the withdrawal. It was subsequently raised. Subsequently, Duca d'Aosta was involved in escorting convoys to North Africa, laying minefields and shelling coastal targets. Attempts were also made to intercept Allied convoys heading to Malta. The service history of the Italian light cruiser Emanuele Filiberto Duca d'Aosta is notable for the fact that during the entire period of active hostilities, up until the capitulation of Italy on September 12, 1943, the ship did not sustain a single instance of damage. Despite aerial bombardments of home ports and torpedo attacks by submarines, the cruiser remained unharmed. Considering that at that time the ship was about 10-11 years old, it was in good technical condition. After surrendering to the Allies, together with the sister cruisers Giuseppe Garibaldi and Duca degli Abruzzi, the ship participated in patrolling the South Atlantic from late 1943 to early 1944. Subsequently, it was placed in reserve and used exclusively as a transport. During the Tehran Conference, the leaders of the Allied countries, Great Britain, the USA, and the USSR, decided on the division of the Italian fleet. As part of reparations, several dozen ships were transferred to the Soviet Union, including Duca d'Aosta. Mastering the ship did not cause significant difficulties, as structurally it bore a resemblance to the Soviet cruisers of Projects 26 and 26 bis, Kirov and Molotov classes. The transfer of the ship to the Black Sea Fleet took place on February 6, 1949. Initially, it received the temporary designation ZIB-15, was then renamed Stalingrad, and finally Kerch. In the Soviet fleet, the ship underwent partial modernization. The original anti-aircraft artillery was dismantled, and Soviet radar stations were installed. Nevertheless, by the early 1950s, the cruiser, in terms of its tactical and technical characteristics, was already inferior to the new Project 68K ships. In the mid-1950s, it was reclassified as a training cruiser and then transferred to the category of training vessels. The ship's service ended with its decommissioning and scrapping for metal around 1960. There is an opinion that the accelerated decommissioning of the remaining Italian ships might have been connected to the loss of the battleship Novorossiysk, formerly the Italian Giulio Cesare, as well as the general obsolescence of the concept of gun cruisers against the backdrop of the development of missile weaponry. The fate of the sister ships turned out differently. For instance, Giuseppe Garibaldi underwent extensive modernization in 1961 and became the first European cruiser equipped with guided missile weaponry. Duca degli Abruzzi remained in service with the Italian Navy until the 1970s. Statistics show that out of the 12 built Condottieri class ships, 6 were lost during combat operations, while 6 survived. Notably, the losses were sustained primarily by ships of the early production series, whereas the later and more advanced modifications successfully survived the war and continued service in the post-war period.